As Simon has already introduced, we are looking at Psalm 98 today, so if you'd like to follow, it's on page 603 in the Pew Bibles. Psalm 98. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvellous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song with music. Make music to the Lord with the harp and the sound of singing, with trumpets and the blast of the ram's horn. Shout for joy before the Lord, the King. Let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy. Let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the prophets with equity. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Morning. Simon, I for one remembered my Christmas jumper. I call this one Silent Night. It's actually got the stable and the shepherds and the kings on it. It was just very misty weather, so you can't fully appreciate it. Hi, so my name's Steve. I've been a part of this church, I think, for around 15 years, and I'm church warden also at our sister church, Holy Trinity Lionsdown. And I've spared no expense with the graphics this morning. I want to start with a bit of a confession. I'm not keen on the Psalms. Is it okay to say that? I'm sure some of you are, and that's great. But, you know, if I'm going to read a book, I'm not going to read sort of song lyrics or poetry. I like a narrative, I like a story, I like, maybe a bit of teaching and explanation. So I wasn't hugely excited about having to speak about Psalm 98. But sometimes, at least for me, you find something in it that you haven't seen before. And I did with Psalm 98, and that's what I want to share with you. I think there's something in here that highlights a really deep truth that sometimes I think we miss in our society. So this morning, my goal is to blow your tiny minds. And I don't mean that as an insult, because I'm going to show you this morning how tiny your minds are, and then we're going to blow them together. What we have in Psalm 98, firstly, is we have a psalm, a song, a bit of poetry. Firstly, a bit about salvation. First 3 verses are about salvation. The next verses 4 to 8 are about joy and the joy we get from that. And then the final verse is a verse about judgment. So it talks about salvation, it talks about joy, and it talks about judgment. And the joy in salvation, but also the joy in judgment. It's a song of praise for salvation. But I want to focus on something we get to when we get to the second half of that really struck me. And it starts when we hear the phrase, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth." We've sung those words this morning. Simon said something very similar when he talked about joy to the world. When you hear that phrase, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth," what are you picturing? Who or what is the earth in this? Who or what is shouting for joy? Now, in the psalm, some examples follow to give us a few clues. So in verse 5, it talks about all these musicians with harps and ram's horns and other things like that. Okay, so these musicians are shouting for joy. But then let's get to verse 7. And what I want you to hear is the ands here. There's some ands doing a lot of heavy lifting. Verse 7. He has revealed his... that's the wrong psalm. That's 97. Let the sea resound and everything in it. The world and all who live in it. So the "and" is creating this separation. The sea itself is rejoicing and the things in it. And the world is rejoicing and the people in it. See that separation? The world is not just us, the world is the world. The world is rejoicing, and us. We're the people of the world, we're the inhabitants. This psalm uses the word tebel to describe the world, and it is the physical creation, and we amin, which is the inhabitants, that's us, both expressing joy. It's the same in verse 9. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity. So when you're talking about world in the first bit, that's not us, we're the peoples, we're not the world. What I'm saying in this psalm is it talks about God's creation as capable of joy and subject to judgment, just as the people of the world are. It's an important premise of the Christian faith, but the thing is, we suffer from a bit of a disease, and we're going to talk about this disease now. We suffer from something called anthropomorphism. Say that 10 times quickly. Anthropomorphism is our tendency to encounter the world and imagine we are at the center of things. We can think of it as a people group, but also as an individual. So, for example, we were on a plane a number of years ago waiting to take off. We were delayed taking off. And there was a child, a very small child, almost a baby, a few rows ahead, who was shouting and screaming to their parents, saying they wanted a lollipop. Becky remembers this. I can see her smiling already. Just shouting, I want a lollipop, I want a lollipop. You know, everyone on the plane's already a bit nervous because of this takeoff delay. So this shouting and screaming child isn't helping. The parents are trying to be amazing parents and doing the proper thing and sort of ignoring the child and not succumbing with weakness and giving up and giving the child a lollipop. But this child is just, you know, upsetting the whole plane, shouting and screaming for a lollipop. It was my son who I think said out loud at high volume what everybody else was thinking when he just screamed out, "Just give her a lollipop!" Which finally put an end to it. But, you know, that image of that child for me, you know, she didn't care about anybody else, right? She was the center of her own universe. She was just in a place where I just want a lollipop. I don't understand why I can't have one. And we do that a lot. We interpret things in our lives where we think things are about us. You know how when you obviously see someone the first time during the day, you say hello if you have social skills. But have you noticed, right, the second time you see somebody, right, you've seen someone that day already, but then you pass them again. You can't say hello again because you've already done that, and you can't ignore them. So you do something what we call lizard face. Are you familiar with lizard face? You kind of widen your mouth and widen your eyes. You sort of go like that. It's like, I've said hello, so I can't say hello. So you just do lizard face to acknowledge they're present. Lizard face. Practice it now. You'll need it after the service. But I encountered somebody at work. I was talking and said, "How are you?" And they said, I'm not great." I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, David blanked me." So David blanked you? Yeah, we passed in the corridor. He just didn't look at me at all, just completely blanked me. And they had assumed that this person, David, passing them by in the corridor and not doing lizard face, was about them. David blanked me. What have I done to David? Why is he ignoring me? I'm like, it's probably not about you. Either David didn't see you, or just was busy doing something else. You know, it wasn't about you. We interpret the events of others to be about ourselves. So that's a long way of understanding this word anthropomorphism, but it's important because what we can take from this psalm and some other references I'm going to talk about now is the Bible actually isn't all about us. But we read it with this bias that it is. Psalm 24, Psalm 33, Psalm 89, all got phrases like, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." The separation again. God takes great pride in the created world. So let's talk about creation. That's the long intro. We're going to look at three things. I want to spend a little bit of time for us just appreciating the magnitude of creation itself. Let's step back, reset our bias a little bit, and understand what else God has created that he cares about. Then we're going to talk about our relationship with that. How does that work? And our responsibilities in it. So to think about the magnitude of creation, I'm going to do this in two ways. We're going to talk about scale and time scale. This is our galaxy. We give it a name. Everyone know the name? The Milky Way. Yeah, all named after chocolate. There are something like 300 billion stars in our galaxy, and we are, well, I've labelled us, as all good tourist maps are labelled. 300 billion stars in that galaxy. So I've because that's a big number, I've calculated all my numbers into ping pong balls. So if all the stars in our galaxy were ping pong balls, and we put them all together on the floor, we would fill the church, we would fill Barnet, we'd actually fill the area of Greater London with ping pong balls. So that's the number of stars in our galaxy. This is a picture from the Webb telescope, the new satellite telescope that we've been getting pictures from for the last few months. And all those dots on there, I know it'd be hard to see from where you are. They're not stars, they're other galaxies. In the observable universe, we think there are around 100 billion galaxies. And ours has got 300 billion stars, so you're starting to do the maths now. If you can do the maths, what we're talking about here is 200 sextillion stars. That's 2 with 23 zeros after it. So in ping pong balls, so we can appreciate it, that means we've now, if we try to have a ping pong ball for every star in the universe that we can see, we've covered the entire planet in ping pong balls to a height of 15 miles. That's twice the height of an airliner flies. That's how many. I think some have said it's probably more than the number of grains of sand there are on the beaches of our planet, which I don't know how they've calculated that number of sand. I prefer my ping pong ball scale. It's a lot. Seems over-designed if it's just for us, right? There is glory in creation itself. God expressed his glory and his power in creation itself. Let's look about the time scale as well, and think about the wonder of creation in that sense. Now, the current sort of scientific theory dates the world at about 4.6 billion years old. Now, I know some Christians don't agree on this, and some still hold to a very literal interpretation of Genesis and its 7 days theory. And I don't want to step on that if people believe that. It's not a fundamental theological difference, and that's fine. But I'm going to talk about this because personally, I don't believe that Genesis requires us to interpret the days as days. The Hebrew word can mean age as well as day anyway. And the 24-hour period doesn't necessarily make sense given you don't get like a sun and moon day till partway through the creation story anyway. So why'd there be a day before you had the moon? My point is the Genesis, their origin stories, it's not a science book. Their origin story is written about 3,000 years ago. There is, incidentally, there's a creation museum in Kentucky, a creation exhibition where they've built things around a sort of 7-day creation model. There's an original sin walkthrough and a room of punishment, which I don't know would be my cup of tea. I mean, it's not very Disneyland. I can't imagine Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse with a sort of a fig leaf arguing over an apple. But there are those that still see that. But we're going to look at I want to show you how I think a grander view of creation looks. So 4.6 billion years is, again, too long for our minds to conceive. So I've turned this all into a day. If all of that happened in a day, these are the times of day we would see the creation of the world. Now just go with me on this. So at midnight, we have nothing physical for the earth. We have gas and dust coalescing at midnight. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we're getting the early signs of an atmosphere. We'll have some water below and some water above. Actually, exactly how Genesis describes it. By 6 a.m., land appears. 6 o'clock in the morning of Earth's whole timeline and history, and we've got land. The next major event is until 6:30 p.m. in the evening. 12 hours have passed before we see multicell organisms. 8:30 p.m., sea plants appear. And 9 p.m., animals. We start to get jellyfish and early animals in the sea. Then at 9:30 p.m., the world encounters its first big extinction event. And global cooling ends a whole era and wipes out something like 85% of the life at that stage. Then we see land plants emerging as we get towards 10 o'clock. Another huge global cooling event, essentially an ice age. 10 p.m., after 10 p.m., we've got land animals appearing. First global warming event. And finally, it's not until 11:15 in the evening, dinosaurs appear. Another global warming event wipes out a good chunk of the dinosaurs, but they survive. Mammals appear, 11:10. And then an asteroid impact, this is bits we might have heard about, ends the Cretaceous period and the dinosaurs die out. It's not until 2 seconds before midnight that humans appear on the scene. The 4.6 billion life of our created Earth. As science currently understands it. Now, I mapped the Genesis references onto that, interestingly enough, and it's almost in the same order as Genesis. I say Genesis isn't a science book, but the order's about right. And it would not hugely surprise me, this is a very personal opinion at this point, small print, but if the next scientific discovery doesn't turn out to be that land plants actually appeared much earlier, because that's the sort of one verse in Genesis that appears, in some ways out of sequence. But while we're on that sort of scientific tangent, it did strike me, remember that, we believe Genesis probably written by Moses, or at least in Moses' era, which dates it around about 1000 BC or earlier. This is at the point in which people believed the earth was flat. Pythagoras didn't come around till something like 300 BC, so a good 700 to 1000 years later to suggest that the earth was a sphere. So if anyone were just sort of making up a story about how the earth was made, you'd have land first, wouldn't you? And then you'd fill it with the water. Otherwise, where's the water going to go? Just there's clearly some inspiration to the writer here who had seen a vision or something that's given a view on how the earth was formed that mirrors quite a lot of what current science shows. But my point of all this is that the wonder of creation, we are an important part of creation. I never want to lessen how important we are, but we can sometimes get so focused on ourselves, we miss the glory of the whole thing. The billions of years that God put into creating our planet, the billions and billions of stars and planets he's created in the massive creation that is so luxuriantly designed. Have I blown any minds yet? That was what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand. It's difficult to comprehend. But now let's talk about our relationship with it. So the words at the top of the screen there are from Genesis 1, verses 26 and 28. God created this vast creation. He's put us on this earth, this planet. And what is our interaction with creation? How does that work? Well, Genesis describes our role in two ways. To rule, and I think if you're reading the NIV version, to subdue. To rule or to have dominion over the earth, and to subdue or tame. What does that mean? Well, the Hebrew word used for rule is rada, and it's a bit difficult to know exactly what is meant by that because it's a very little used word in the Bible. There is another word that is used to describe our rule over creation later on in Genesis, and that word is mashal. Now, mashal is an easier word to study because it's used more frequently throughout the Bible, and mashal basically is a word that's used to describe God's rule over us. So our rule over our planet is to mirror God's rule over us. We know Rada is not a harsh rule. The word perek is used for that. Rada is more indicative of the rule a shepherd might have over a flock. And what about to subdue? Kabash is the word. This isn't to... The word tends to mean the sort of subduing you would do over an unruly child, one who's desperate for a lollipop, perhaps. It's the taming and the nurturing of things. And perhaps the best way of actually really understanding how that works is there are many examples throughout the Old Testament where God gives instruction on how we're supposed to interact between us and the earth. And we can see how this subduing is not harsh subduing, it's working together. So I'm going to just describe some really, really quickly. In Genesis 2, we are instructed to work in the garden and, quote, take care of it. In Genesis 4, Cain and Abel are given two different jobs. Cain to work the soil, Abel to tend the animals. So work division in terms of looking after the earth. In Exodus, the Hittites, God says, I'm going to move the Hittites out of some land, but I'm going to do it slowly because I don't want to upset, basically, the biodiversity. He said the wild animals will get out of control if we do it too quickly. I think it's the first, human reference of biodiversity management. And Deuteronomy talks about Sabbath day for your ox, right? Your working animal should have a day off. Don't muzzle working animals. Leviticus, the fields get a year off. Deuteronomy, don't chop down trees for war. There's all sorts of instructions from God about how we should interact positively and sustainably with the earth. It's symbiotic. It's not a resource for us to be used up or beaten into submission. God made it and asked us to serve it. So how are we doing serving our earth? If you watch anything with David Attenborough in it, you probably know it's not going brilliantly well. I'm just going to give you a couple of stats, and then we're going to talk about our responsibility as we close. This is a graph from a website called Our World in Data, and this is about the biodiversity of mammals. So our mammals on our planet, that's with a vertebra, fundamentally. What is the world currently made up of? Well, 34%. I can't see the slide myself. There's a little pop-up. I'm going to change this. There's a window blocking the screen there. 34% of mammals on the earth is us. 62% is our livestock. All right, and that's broken down there. We've got cattle, we've got sheep. Donkeys make 1%. Becky, you're pleased to hear, lover of donkeys. And our pets are included in there, but they're less than 1%. They don't even get their own box. 96% of the biodiversity of our planet, of mammals, is humans and their livestock. Only 4% is wild animals, mixed between sea mammals and land mammals. We have dominated this planet. In the 2 seconds we've been around on our 24-hour time clock, we have dominated the planet. 50% of the world's oceans are commercially fished now. We've managed to protect 15% of our land and 7% of our ocean. So we're not doing great, and I won't spend more time on that because I think we all realize that. We have a crucial 60 years ahead of us. I say 60 years because the world's population is currently at 8 billion. It's growing, but the growing is slowing. The current predictions are that the world's population will peak at 10 billion in 2086 before it then starts to drop. So with 60 years of increasing population, that's why I say we've got a crucial 60 years for our planet and how we're caring for it and how we're protecting it. And that's why something like COP28, which is starting this week, is a really important time. And it's a challenging time. You know, we have Sultan Al Jaber, who Pam mentioned in the prayers, is head of one of the world's leading oil producers of the Abu Dhabi Oil Company, which is a company that has currently committed to doubling their production capacity over the next 6 years. So this is both a threat, but also an opportunity. If he, through this conference, is able to reflect on that and change some of the plans that they have, then there are opportunities for us. So God has expressed his glory not just in us, but in creation, in its scale and its vastness. Our role in creation is symbiotic with it, to protect, to nurture, and to care for it. And we are falling behind on that. What should we be doing? What should we be thinking as Christians? 3 things to close, to think about. The first is to repent. That's where we have to start as Christians on so many things, and where we differ from the rest of the world. There are things where we have to say, we have taken a wrong direction, we're not fulfilling what God would want of us, and we just have to say sorry for that. There's an excellent article called The Song of the Prophets that Christian Aid published in 2014, but republished in 2020, that talks a little bit about this and the importance of Christian repentance with regard to the environment. And if I can quote the Pope, if that's okay, in 2022, last year, the Pope called on all Christians to, he talked about how we had, and I'm quoting him here, fallen prey to consumerist excesses and tyrannical anthropocentrism. So you know what he means now by that. And this attitude is at odds with Christ's centrality in the work of creation. I call on Christians to repent and modify their lifestyles. That was the Pope last year. So modify lifestyles. Well, what could be a potential response be? Think of simple things. So I've just given some ideas here on three areas that we can all think about. Firstly, our eating. Okay? I've been trying to go veggie once a week. Quite patchy on that, but we're getting there. I think we're veggie twice a week at the moment, but it's on and off, right? There are things we can do with eating. Think about where your food's coming from. How far has it traveled to get to your plate, right? We can make sensible choices about the things we eat that start to make a difference. Think about our shopping. There's 2 bits of packaging up there, both capable of holding cakes. The one on the right, is a single-use plastic, non-recyclable. But the box in the middle, is fully biodegradable, okay? Look at the bottom of your coffee cup. If it's not biodegradable, go and start buying it from another place where it is, right? We have the opportunity to make small differences where we are. Is it fair trade? Is it Rainforest Alliance? Okay, make sensible choices with our shopping. And the third thing is traveling, which is a real challenging one for me because I have a global role in a large organization, and they ask me to travel a lot. And I know that one short haul flight can add something like 10% to the average person's carbon footprint for a year. So travel choices, how often we travel and how we travel, are also things that we can be thinking about in our own lives. And the last thing I want to call us on to do is to think about championing the cause of the planet. It's always saddened me that I think some of the loudest voices for our environment have not always been Christian voices. They've come from secular organizations. And I wonder, where are we in this? Where is the church in terms of crying out for this? I mean, the good news is they are there. There are organizations there, and I'll reference a couple now. But we should all be fighting this cause, right? Write to your MP, okay? Complain about stuff, right? If it's not good for the planet. You know, turn up at rallies and things like that, right? That's okay for us to do that. I met two Just Stop Oil protesters last summer. And I asked them the question, I said, what's driving you in terms of what you do with Just Stop Oil? You know, these are the people that go to a cricket match and throw confetti on the pitch and then get carried off by police, right? I said, what's driving you? And one of them said to me, the Beatitudes. I was like, that was not the answer I was expecting. The Beatitudes. And you know, and this person was a monk. Right? This person was a monk, 62 years old, I think he was. You know, part of Just Stop Oil, because he said, you know, we have to, someone's got to fight the fight. They're not a Christian organization, and maybe we don't all agree with throwing confetti on cricket pitches, but the point is, you know, he felt so passionate about it that that's what he was doing. There are lots of Christian organizations out there that you can be part of and you can be informed from. The Climate Coalition, is a coalition of a number of organizations, of which the Church of England is one. Pray and Fast for the Climate, go to their website, lots of resources. Roca, which I think means, Spanish for the rock, do a lot of education and research into environmental issues. Operation Noah is up there. The QR code on the right, if you scan that on your phones, that will take you to a Church of England document that's got guidance of what Christians can be praying about and thinking about during COP28, which is on this week. So, you know, access that document. You can just scan that with your phone and get to that. Or I think if you just go to the Church of England website, you can access it through there. So, look, lots to think about there. As a final opportunity, there is. Last year I went on a 3-day retreat for Christians to sort of reconnect with the environment and God's creation. It was a very meaningful 3 days for me. It was out of my comfort zone. I've not done a lot of tree hugging before. We literally did that. But it woke something in me, I would say. I know that organisation is running more next spring. So 12th to the 14th of April, there is one at Rydal Hall in the Lake District. There's one in the 24th to the 26th of May at Hillfield Friary in Dorset. So you'll spend time with the monks there as well as part of their community, just engaging with nature and understanding how God expresses his glory through creation. I'm going to close with a short prayer and then ask the band to come back up. They can come back up now if they want. Father, we are sorry for the ways in which we have not always through our lives protected and guarded your creation in the way we should have. If we've put ourselves at the center too much, we're sorry. We seek your forgiveness. Lord, help us to take action where we can, to pray for action where we can't, and to do this in positive hope. Lord, we thank you for what you've given us as an earth to live upon and to be part of. Help us find our proper place in it. Amen.